And our reactions to life say a ton about who we are. All right, good morning, church. How are we doing today? It's good to see everybody. I hope you are all well. Sometimes when you set out a schedule for preaching and for the lessons you're going to live, and that you're going to preach, but then hopefully live, you figure out that you're doing one that you realize that earlier in life you wouldn't have listened to. So I'm speaking today about something that I know would have been hard for me to accept when I was a younger man and Christian. All right? And it makes me, sometimes Jesus told parables that were confusing, and some people, either willfully or not, could not understand what he was saying or would not listen to what he was saying. And Jesus said, Jesus isn't bothered about it. He's like, well, whoever has ears, let him hear. And I feel like this is a sermon a little bit like that. There will be some of us today that will readily want to listen to something like I'm going to talk about today, and there will be some of us who willfully will not want to listen to it. And well, there you go. Yesterday I was coaching my son's team, his little soccer team, and I love to coach my kids. But I'm not a soccer player myself. I've just watched it intensely for like the last 8 years, as my kids have really. I've watched hundreds and hundreds of their games, and I've watched on television. I've tried to get a good understanding of this sport that I love so much. And so yesterday I was coaching Jasper's game, and they went down 1-0 right away. One of our players made a pretty bad mistake, and it's one of the only goals we've let up all season. And so, and as a coach, when someone makes a mistake like that, you're like, it's okay. I'm fine, you're fine, we're good. Just keep your heads up, everybody, okay? So then about 5 minutes later, we're down on the other side, we're pressing, and the official calls up, stops the game, calls a free kick. One of our players lines up as soon as the official will let them, and lets rip just a laser right into the back of the net. And so now we're tied. And but I can hear something over on the other side of the field, and some parents started getting involved in the officiating. All right, and the official was just a young man, like he's probably 16, 17 years old. He's got this parent who's kind of in his face talking to him, and he's like, oh, okay. And he takes away the goal and gives the ball back to the other team. And I'm not thinking about what I'm doing. I just know that all of a sudden I'm on the field, on the other side of the field. My arms are up in the air, and I'm about to shout, and I just stop myself. And I just compose myself, and I turn around, and I go back to my side of the field, and I just instead of saying anything out loud, I mumble under my breath to myself, and the game goes on. Now, we ended up winning 4-1. It wasn't a big deal. But that's repentance for me, okay? I played a lot of sports growing up, and it's funny, as a player, I was well behaved as a player. Like, I didn't shout, I never said anything to the official. While I was very, very competitive, I was good. I was composed as someone who played. Now, as a spectator, I'm not like that at all. Okay? And as a coach, I'm not like that at all. All right, but as a player, I was. So this is new for me, having to repent of this sort of thing. And our reactions to life say a ton about who we are. Like, what happens to you? What happens to you when people do something to you or say something to you? Your reactions to those unplanned events say everything, in my mind, okay, about who you are, really. When you don't have the time to compose yourself, or you don't have the time to write a script for how you're going to act, the way you act in a moment and the way you react in a moment, that's who you are. And for some people, I'll be like, I don't really, I'll be with them, and then something will happen, and like this monster comes up, and then I'm like, oh, there you are. There you are. That's who you are. That's who you are. And I think we spend a lot of our time trying to ineffectively change those monsters inside of us. You know, when you work hard at something, or you risk much for something, or you put your reputation on the line for some effort and it falls apart or it fails, most people have a reaction that is based upon where they are in life. For some people, that reaction is anger. For some people, that reaction is personal offense. For some people, it's stress or anxiety or worry. And yet, for some people, and this is what's amazing to me, their reaction to loss and the reaction to failure or fiasco seems to be nothing short of peace and of calm. You know, Matthew 8:23-26 says this: as he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. This is about Jesus. Suddenly a violent storm arose on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waves. But Jesus kept sleeping. So the disciples came to him and woke him up, saying, "Lord, save us, we are going to die." Now, this is who some of us are. When something bad happens, we want everybody to flip out along with us. If we see something that's unfair, we want everyone to believe it's unfair, and we want them to feel the injustice that we feel. All right? If something bad happens to us, we want everyone to mourn with us. And then we want them to feel exactly what we felt. And you've done this all the time, because if your spouse or the person you love hurts you, they could say they're sorry, but there's a part of you, you're not satisfied unless they can feel some semblance of the pain that they just caused you. Disciples are in the boat. It's storming. They're going to die. They're flipping out. Jesus is asleep. Now, Jesus isn't worried. All right? He knows there's a storm. But he's asleep. He's not worried. The disciples wake him up so that they can make him as anxious as they are. Like, Jesus, don't you care? We want you to be as freaked out as we are. He said to them, "Why are you afraid, you of little faith?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was great calm. I think we all want to live like that, unbothered. We want to be unbothered by the wind and the waves, to have the ability amidst the angst and the conflict, the whirlwind of accusation or outrage and blame within this world, to just be able to sleep at night. I don't know if you will like the answer to this. I don't know if you'll like what it means and what it takes to get from this place where you want everyone to be where you are and flipping out, where you react poorly. What it takes to get to the place where you react with peace, with non-anxiety, is not easy, and it goes against our basic nature. There is no formula, for sure. There's definitely no internal switch you can just turn on. By the end of today, there's not going to be like a button you find inside of your soul or your heart that you can flip and now everything's different. Like most good things, the answer takes time and it takes consistent effort. John chapter 7, verse 2-8, this is another narrative about Jesus. It says the Jewish festival of shelters was near, so his brothers said to him, "Leave here and go to Judea so that your disciples can see your works that you are doing. For no one does anything in secret while he's seeking public recognition. If you do these things, show yourself to the world." For not even his brothers believed in him. All right, so I want to be real clear what's happening. His family is telling him, "Hey, if all these things that people are saying about you are true, you should just go down to this huge festival that's happening, one of the annual celebrations, and you should show everybody what you can do. That way everybody will believe in you." All right, now they're not saying this from a place of wanting to be helpful. All right, they're saying this because they don't believe Jesus. All right, Jesus told them, "My time has not yet arrived, yet your time is always at hand." The world cannot hate you, but it does hate me because of what I testify about it. That its works are evil. Go up to the festival yourselves. I'm not going to this festival because my time has not yet fully come. I've always been so intrigued about this verse. You know, his family, who we obviously grew up with, doubts all the claims that he makes about himself. Doubts the claims that other people make about him. They don't believe that he's ever done any miracles. In many ways, it's like your own sibling not believing you after you just dunked a basketball for the first time. Yeah. All right, and you say, I just dunked the ball, and your sibling, who's probably your brother, doesn't believe you. And they say, okay, if you can dunk a basketball, let's go down to the public courts, do it in front of everybody. I mean, that would be amazing. If you can dunk a basketball, you should want everyone to know you can dunk a basketball. It's a cynical remark. But it also shows that even if Jesus was willing to prove that he was telling the truth, that what his family believes is that he should be conducting himself in a very specific kind of way, if those things are true. A way that earns public respect. A way of life that says, if you're good at something, then one of the most important things is that others should respect you for it. The point of being good at something is so that you can get some kind of advantage out of it in this world. Show everyone what you're worth. Jesus is countering such values in this passage and throughout his entire ministry, to be honest. Jesus cared nothing for recognition. He cared nothing for title. He did not care if people respected him or not, as long as they didn't dishonor God. He cared nothing for money or what it could buy. He did not care about how the world views success or failure. He was not moved on which of those labels were placed upon him. Jesus was a man who lived with what we're going to call, for the purposes of today, second half life values and perspectives. This term, second half life, is coined by a famous psychiatrist named Carl Jung. And we're going to use his famous observation of life, or at least some of its vocabulary, as a way of understanding biblical wisdom today, and the wisdom that Jesus seems to so effortlessly demonstrate. Okay? Today we're going to look at life as though we're living it, and it's divided into two parts. Okay? There's two halves of life. Now, obviously, life is way more complicated than that, but in order to illustrate a very specific kind of wisdom, we need to look at life this way for this morning. The important thing to remember is that these two lives take place in linear fashion. You have to live one life before the other. You have to do it in a specific order. You can't skip one half of life to get to the other half of life. If you're going to get to the second half of life, you have to live the first half of life. Does that make sense? In other words, no one gets to skip or bypass the first half. Everyone has to go through it. So there's no shame in being in it. So for some people, they only experience the first half of life. They live their entire lives living in the first half of life. For those people, they often suffer crippling disappointment about their life. This often begins when someone turns 40. They can be bitter and easily offended by many things. For others, they only experience the second half of life for a short time. And yet, for the wisest among us, they experience the second half of life for the longest period of time. Proverbs 14:30 says this: a tranquil heart is life to the body, but passion is rottenness to the bones. It's kind of an interesting proverb. The word passion here is sometimes translated in the Bible as envy, as jealousy, as anger. It's a word that comes from believing someone is either betraying you or getting something that you think you should have. All right? It's the type of feeling a spouse has when they think their husband or wife might be cheating on them. So what the verse is communicating is that wisdom demonstrates the ability to be at peace, to not suffer anxiety and the worry that makes your body feel like it's wasting away. But without wisdom, a person lets their passion, their anger, their worry, their envy destroy them from the inside out, just like rot. We spend a lot of time in the first half of life learning how to manage anger and passion and worry and insecurity and ambition and an obsession with recognition, etc., etc. These are common feelings and states of mind that simply learning to live in this world creates within us. Nobody gets to escape that. There are some very few people, for whatever reason, don't suffer crippling emotions at times. Very, very few. Often such feelings and fixtures in our makeup drive us towards excellence. They drive us towards success. We don't want to be left behind. We don't want to be looked at as a loser. We want to be recognized, which means we have to do hard things. All right, and it drives us towards success. All right, there's nothing inherently wrong with any of that. It's a part of first half life. All right, but as we become wise, we don't allow such feelings to drive us the same way any longer. We gain perspective, and more often than not, peace will rule us, and that alone gives us another level of clarity on what we ought to do next, or what we should ultimately be doing at all. We ask more questions and are less afraid of the answers. We start asking what we gain by doing a thing, and we begin asking what the meaning of doing a thing is. So we stop asking what we gain, and we start asking what's the meaning of what I'm doing. The second half of life begins to change what matters to us, for better, always for the better. But again, let me be clear, there's no problem with being in the first half of life, unless you've been there for too long. You with me?
Yeah.
You know, my father-in-law's visiting today. I've told you stories about him in the past. And my mother-in-law, they're two of my favorite people in the world. But I was talking to him the other day, and he was recounting a quote by Larry Bird the other night. And I'm going to tell you that quote in a second, okay? But first I want to explain to you that I am not a basketball player, okay? I never was. I never really liked the sport that much, really. But the other night, after house church, some of us played a game of pig together. Larry Pless, Evan Pless, myself, Cruzy, Donnie. We played a little game. And here's the thing. I'm not a basketball player, all right? I am an athlete. And God is with me. And so I won that game of pig, okay? No big surprise there, all right? But I beat Larry, who devotes a lot of time to playing basketball. All right? It's actually shameful that I won, to be honest. I know Larry's teaching the kids right now, but you can tell him about this later, all right? I do feel like Larry should be ashamed. Now here's the thing. The second game, Larry won. Okay? So for the meantime, he is the king of the court, at least in our house church. When he won the second game, inside my heart, a voice spoke to me. And the voice said, it's only a game. It doesn't mean anything. All right, now back to Larry Bird. During some interview back in the 80s, he was marveling at modern life. And he said that it's kind of absurd that I have become wealthy and famous because I can put a leather ball through an iron hoop better than most people. It's only a game. Now, me losing to Larry Pless and Pig and saying it's only a game, and Larry Bird saying the same thing after beating the Lakers for an NBA title is not the same thing. When I say it's only a game, okay, it's because I'm wrestling with all the ego, pride, and need for recognition that comes with still trying to let go of the pull from first half life. When Larry Legend says it, it's because he seemed to have gained, at least for a moment during an interview, some measure of second half life wisdom and perspective. So in the normal passage, in our original passage, Jesus' family is still talking like people mired in the perspectives of first half. Go get your recognition. Show people what you can do. People should know that you're good. You should be recognized for what you have if this is who you are. Everybody should know. Something's wrong if people don't know. On the other hand, Jesus speaks to someone who sees everything from second half life thinking. So let me try and explain this from, I just made up a parable yesterday, okay? So bear with me. Pretend that you are tasked, okay, for whatever reason, with jumping out of an airplane every day for the rest of your life. That is now your job, all right? And you start tomorrow. All right, so I don't know, somebody in this universe has now said, Jacob, your job is to jump out of the plane every day, sometimes multiple times a day. Okay? You have to jump out of the plane and you have to hit the target at the bottom. Now here's the thing, if you are a normal person, I know that we have some abnormal people here, the idea of jumping out of a plane is terrifying to you. You might spend a lot of time thinking of worst case scenarios the night before you jump out of a plane. You wonder if the chute will fail. You wonder about the person that's now packing your parachute. Are they drunk? Are they sober right now? Have they ever made a mistake in the past? All right? You'll try and understand, you'll spend a ton of time looking at all the rules and procedures of jumping out of a plane. Which line do I pull first? When do I pull it? What time? You're going to memorize all that stuff because your life depends upon it. All right? And you are going to be terrified. But here's the thing. You're going to be afraid, and then you're going to spend a lot of time looking like you're not afraid. All right? I'm guessing half the room does that. All right? I don't want to look like I'm afraid. I'm terrified, but I don't want to look like I'm afraid. So you're going to put effort into that as well. You might spend a lot of time trying to make sure that you get on the plane that has the best pilot. All right? There's a lot of planes taking off. You want the one that's got the good pilot. All right? And you might get irritated when other people get assigned training times with the best instructors. All right, you notice right away that some instructors are better than others, and you want to be with the best instructor. And you start to get a little irritated when other people get to be with the best instructor and you get to be with the moron instructor, okay? And boy, do you care about all the guidelines and rules, making sure you know them and making sure you're following them. You jump out of the plane for the first time exactly the way that you're told. As a matter of fact, every time you jump out of the plane, you do it exactly the way you're told. You know why? Because you don't want to die. All right? You do it the same way every time. And you always try and hit the target on the ground. They paint a huge target. They tell you your job is to jump out of the plane and you're supposed to hit that target. You spend your whole jump maneuvering so that you can land as close to that target as possible. And the better you get at it, the more and more often you get close to that target or you land in the target, you find the more recognition that you start getting from other people who are jumping out of airplanes or who are watching people jumping out of airplanes. So you dig in and you try and follow the rules and the guidelines even more closely, which earns you even more praise and recognition. Pretty soon, you've done hundreds of jumps, thousands of jumps, thousands of landings. And now, you're good at this. You understand how to do this work. You are recognized for how you do this work and how good you are. Day after day, hitting the target. Even in bad weather, you've learned how to hit the target. In other difficult variables, you've learned how to hit that target. Now, sometimes you miss, and that bothers you. And it bothers you so much that you work even harder, and you get better and better, and you are rewarded with respect and recognition. You are fully mastering the first half of life. Now, you understand the rules and you become an expert. You're successful in what you've been taught and tasked to do. You have earned respect through your hard work and accomplishments. You are secure in what you do. You understand who you are. You jump out of planes and you hit targets on the ground. Before too long, though, something happens inside of you. Soon you realize that landing in the target has become less meaningful to you than not failing to hit the target. In other words, success is no longer your goal. Not failing has become your goal. And you find your heart telling you that not failing is not a very inspiring goal. It's meaningless, you start to realize. And you're bothered. You start to wonder what the point of all this jumping out of airplanes and hitting targets is. Still, you have started to master not failing. Not only are you good at what you do, but now you've mastered not failing. One day, as you jump out of the plane, for the first time, you notice the horizon. And it's beautiful. As a matter of fact, you start to notice that everything is beautiful. The land, the sky, the wind running past your skin, the water in the far distance that the sun is reflecting off of. It's stunning. You end the jump and you hit your target. But now you want to jump again as soon as possible. You jump again. And again, you're amazed at all the stuff you never noticed before. You're not afraid of dying. You know the rules of jumping so well, you don't even have to think about it. You just do them. Your body does them. The skills of jumping out of a plane are now instinctual to you. So instead of needing to focus on all of the rules, you begin to notice the world around you in ways that you hadn't before. You start to notice that there's peace and beauty to this task of jumping out of a plane. You simply love to look around when you jump. You hit your target. This is starting to be fun. The rules, the procedures, the guidelines you've memorized and you followed all your life. Now you start to understand why they were put into place. They've helped you become what you are. However, you find you no longer need to follow them in the same ways. You see that others who haven't jumped out of the plane thousands of times need those rules and cling to those rules. All right? But now you understand what you're doing, how a parachute works, physics, wind. You know how to manage these things without needing to reference the rules all the time. You know the rules are the things that taught you to manage all the variables, but now you start changing some of the rules in ways that make jumping out of a plane even more safe and even better. The same framework for all the rules are there, but now they're tailored to who you are and to what you are trying to do. And now you can use your mind not to focus on the safety rules, but to see the world around you and to not be afraid. And then one day something happens that hasn't happened in a long time. You miss your target. And looking around and enjoying the jump, you've missed the target for the first time in a long time. And you find, amazingly, that you don't care. You could have hit it. But you know how to hit a target. You know how to find the target, and you realize that target might be meaningless. You want to see the world, and you want to see the land in all these different ways, and it means maybe not always hitting that target in order to do so. Your reputation as a jumper begins to decline because you start missing targets. And amazingly, you find that you don't care about your reputation anymore. You don't care if others respect you. You don't care what others think of you. You just want to see the world and understand it. And now the joy of simply jumping from a plane means so much more to you now that your rank or reputation no longer means anything to you. Because you know that you are a good jumper and could land wherever they tell you to land, if that mattered to you. But it no longer does. Whether people respect you or recognize you, whether you get a title or a position, is something that used to be important to you, but now you find that none of it is. What is important now is the jump itself, making it the best jump ever, no matter what anyone knows, sees, or cares. You have now entered the second half of life. You know, in some ways, ego both gets in the way and drives a person toward meaning in the first half of life. Then questioning and challenging your own ego is what drives and gets in the way of meaning in the second half of life. Now, what my example, my little parable, takes pains to explain is that you cannot get to the second half of life without doing the first half of life well. You have to master everything in the first half of life to get to the second half of life. You cannot become a healthy person that cares nothing about what the world thinks about you. You can't be someone that doesn't get stressed out all the time by things going wrong. You can't become the type of person that doesn't react badly to bad things happening until you've done all that you need to do in the first half of life, which is work hard, become excellent with the work that you do your work with your family, follow the rules, master the rules. You can't get to that second half without doing the first half well. You know, I was reading a book about a theologian that was using Carl Jung's concept of first and second half life to illustrate spiritual maturation. You guys with me here? Nope. And he says something really interesting, and I think that this is fascinating. People who are in the first half of life get frustrated by people in the second half of life. Right? Because people in the second half of life, they don't give you answers to anything. They give like generalized mystic statements that don't seem to really help.
Yeah.
All right? They don't have a lot of definitive opinions about things. They're slow, like they live life slow. They don't get mad at things that people in the first half of life think that everybody should be getting mad at. Meanwhile, people in the second half of life seem to be fine with all of that frustration and pushiness that those in the first half of life have. This is how you know you're in the second half of life. All right? When other people in the first half of life don't bother you anymore. If you're bothered by people, you're not in the second half of life. All right? People in the second half of life understand that you have to go through all that pushiness and frustration first. You have to get through that. You have to get through that well. So they're not mad at anybody that's going through it. Their patience and lack of reaction is often misconstrued as disinterest or complacency. They aren't offended at not being listened to by those in the first half of life. All right? Go ahead, everybody, turn to Philippians chapter 2. We're going to close it out here in just a second. People from the two halves of life have trouble communicating with one another. I find that to be interesting. There's no way from someone in the second half of life to pull someone from the first half of life up. You just have to go through it. When you have a problem and you're speaking to someone from the second half of life, oftentimes you leave the conversation like, I think that sounds good, but I don't find that to be helpful for what I'm going through right now. Sometimes their answers seem like pat answers. Like you just have to trust the Lord. Or you just need to love people. And you look at those answers as being cop-outs. People in the first half of life tend to see the solutions of those in the second half of life as overly simplistic. Meanwhile, those in the second half of life cannot find adequate vocabulary to express their thinking because it's not a vocabulary problem, really. It's an experience of seeing. You can never adequately explain the color green to someone who's blind. You have to experience seeing it. So how do we get there? How do we get to the second half of life where you're not bothered, where you're not wrestling all the time, where you can sleep? I mean, wouldn't it just be great to have blessed sleep? You get home from your day and you're not replaying everything that just happened, all the conversations, what you should have said, what you could have said, what someone else said. You don't start the argument up again, but this time you say the right things and you just like crush the person that you were talking to. If instead you just went to bed and you just went to sleep. How do we get there? Philippians chapter 2, verse 1. If then there is any encouragement in Christ, if any consolation of love, if any fellowship with the Spirit, if any affection and mercy, make my joy complete by thinking the same way, having the same love, united in spirit, intent on one purpose. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility consider others as more important than yourselves. Everyone should look not to his own interests, but rather to the interests of others. Adopt the same attitude as that of Jesus Christ, who existing in the form of God did not consider equality with God as something to be exploited. Instead, he emptied himself by assuming the form of a servant, taking on the likeness of humanity, and when he had become as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. You know, Philippians 2 is like reading the entire gospel wrapped up in one small poem. And it all embodies these characteristics of second half life. If you want to live unbothered by the prospect of failure, if you want to be unmoved by the angst and drama of the world around you, if you want to be able to sleep while the storms continue to rage, then you have to practice a discipline of ego-crushing, humility-seeking, self-denying, and others-oriented decision-making and living. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or conceit. You have to start asking why you do what you do. and then do nothing out of selfish ambition and conceit. And you have to practice that. You can't just do it once and go, okay, revelation time.
Yeah.
That has to become the way that you live. In humility, consider others as more important than yourselves. Hey, there's a spectrum in what that looks like. I can't tell you exactly what that looks like, but I know it takes effort. I know nobody just does this. You have to think about doing it. Everyone should look not to his own interests, but to the interests of others. This means that when there is a decision to be made, you are not thinking first and foremost about yourself, but about what will most benefit other people. And then you have to live that way. At work, at home, with your spouse, with your roommates, with your colleagues, at school, you have to think about decisions that way. Do not consider equality as something to be exploited. You know, Jesus talks about equality with that he wasn't going to exploit his position. He could have done anything with his position. He's the Son of God. He could have done anything with his power and his talent, but he did not exploit it for his own benefit. Empty yourself by assuming the form of a servant. I mean, we could do this one all day. Assuming the form of a servant. Empty yourself. You know how you get rid of your ego? I mean, you make yourself nothing. You know, you should come here and set up the chairs somewhere. Or stay late and put them away. You know, I love Wes. Wes is always, like, he stays late. You know, Wes will preach the sermon, organize the service, and then stay late and put away all the chairs. All right? Some of us should be doing it. We should be assuming the form of a servant. We should walk into other people's homes looking to serve. All right? Humble yourself by becoming obedient even to the point of death. You know, all of this self-denial seems like a tall order. We're going to end it here. Yet what world-renowned psychiatrists like Carl Jung and many, many others are increasingly saying is that the path people must take to find meaning is this. In order to find peace, in order to be satisfied. Like, how tall does the ladder go that you're trying to climb? When do you think it ends? When is enough accolade enough? When will enough recognition be enough? When will there be enough likes? When will there be enough views? When do you think it ends? The world will tell you it never ends, and you'll waste your whole life chasing. It turns out Jesus was not speaking metaphorically when he said in Matthew 16:26 that we had to be willing to lose our life in order to find it. You know, I likely could have just read that verse. Just gotten up here, said good morning to you all, made fun of Larry Pless, read that verse, and then walked off the stage. But perhaps that would have been overly simplistic. Of course, for the wise among us, it would have been exactly enough. Have a great Sunday. Amen.